Buh, buh. What's that? Nothing. We just here. I have no idea what we're gonna do today. No idea what we're gonna talk about today. I think there was like one thing, but I kind of forgot exact. Oh yeah, no, I already know one of the topics. So we're gonna kind of be talking about like the trans woman who won like a beauty pageant earlier this week, and how like so many people were enraged by this because they're like, she bought her beauty, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, a lot of the people in these beauty contestants, they're not like naturally pretty. Like they've got filler, eyebrow, whatever they're called, Mike. This corset really is, fucking with me. Micro needling or something like that. Microblading. Yes. Lash extensions and all, like, and I'm sure most of them have rhinoplasties too. Like, I don't understand like how that's like this thing that's like, oh my god, she bought her beauty. It's like literally everyone in that fucking competition did anyways. So many people were like vying for like a segregation of like trans beauty pageants and just regular ones. And it's like, do you guys understand that the segregation thing is not ideal, right? This like music is so funny because it reminds me of like SpongeBob. It's very SpongeBob. It's giving SpongeBob. But yeah, it's just like I don't know how people are like so like against like trans women being in like beauty pageants. Ugh. Honestly, do not care for this music. Let's find a different one. Of course, Tennessee's. It is pretty nice. I should like see the whole thing. Oof. Got like everything. It's got a little dress and whatever. Hello Johnny. But trans people in sports, honestly, like obviously at a very like an Olympic level, or like actual like professional athletes, whatever, I think it definitely makes sense that there should be some regulations in place because I mean, trans women are probably more predisposed to just having denser muscles. So like I get that, especially if you're like training whatever, but like as the average person, like if I were to compete with like women who are like 5'2", 110 pounds, whatever, so like in my bracket, I most likely would not be at the top of the pack, right? So it's like when it comes to just casual sports, like oh, track, soccer, football, whatever, like even if they're like JV or varsity, whatever, most of the time there's really not going to be this huge noticeable improvement. And then it's like if you then, you know, put, trans women with men, hypothetically, right? I think obviously the trans women are going to underperform. And then vice versa, like for an MTF, or sorry, an FTM, so female to male, if you were to put them with cis women, they would overperform, right? And we've seen that. We've seen like an FTM wrestler that was in like I believe his teens, who was obviously on hormones, right? And he destroyed all of the women wrestlers because obviously, right? So it's such a delicate issue, and there's so much that has to be kind of regarded in this sense. But I think overall, it doesn't really make sense to make these huge, like, sweeping calls in regards to anybody. Because it's like most of the time, it just won't be relevant, right? I understand it with like really professional athletes, Olympians, whatever. Like, I get that there could definitely be an advantage, right? But when it comes to like casual sports, there most certainly is not going to be this massive advantage that requires people to be like, segregated. It's such like an intense, and it's borderline like, dehumanizing when you have like, okay, here are the cis people and then here are the trans people. It's really, really weird. I definitely think that there should be like hormone levels that are required because you should not have a trans woman who says that they're just a trans woman not on HRT competing in these sports, because I mean, physically they would just be like a man in terms of how they would perform. People who hold this like mindset of like trans people shouldn't be in sports are like predominantly doing this because they don't view trans women as women. It's not necessarily like, oh, like my daughter is going to be whatever, my granddaughter is going to be whatever. It's just like they view trans women as like trans women are men to them, right? You know, more conservative people just in general don't regard trans women as women. So that's where it becomes very problematic, because it's like, how are you going to get like to any sort of agreement when something so fundamental is disagreed upon? Like, it's not even just a specific topic, it's like the very foundation of what, you know, trans people stand for, their gender identity, is being completely disregarded. So the topic as like a mainstream thing is definitely not just like, should trans people be in sports? It's like, should we acknowledge that, you know, trans identities are real, you know? And for most people, that's literally all it is. Like, for a majority of like suburban people or just like the casual listener, it's not like, they don't think like, oh, this person's gonna be better in the Olympics. It's just gonna be, you know, this person should not be competing with my daughter because that's the fucking man. And that's like the problem with it, right? Because it's not out of a place of concern, it's out of a place of malice. And that's why it's so different, because it's going to be case by case. Like, every person's body is so uniquely different, and that's what makes sports in the first place. Hormones definitely play a part into how our bodies respond to things and how we would perform in a physical sense. So like I said, if you're in like an actual professional level sport, you most certainly should have, you know, hormone levels that you need to adhere by, because we see, right, that certain people just naturally succeed based on hormone levels. What do you mean, like, obeying by the hormone levels and rules for a year? Like, only a year they were on hormones, or they adhered to them for a year and then they stopped? Because it makes no sense that it would just have to be for a year. Because as soon as you stop hormones, it would, like, you should be on it for many, many years. I mean, I myself have been on hormones for like 6 years, right? Or more. I don't really remember. But it takes, I think, like 4 years for your body to relatively like fully transition. And so there should definitely be some, you know, general sweeping stance in terms of like, you know, trans people should be on hormones for a blank amount of years before they can compete in like professional sport. Of course it's restrictive, but you have to understand, like, you know, as a trans person, it really just truly is not fair sometimes. Being on hormones change the tone and intonation of the voice. The hormones can change your voice only if you are FTM. So if you're female to male, testosterone will naturally deepen your voice. But for trans women, it doesn't change anything. So if you're a trans woman, you have to voice train and everything and all that jazz, right? Trans men, in a lot of ways, have it easier than trans women. And trans women have it easier in a few ways compared to trans men. Because trans women and trans men both have access to a lot of surgeries. I think purely based off of hormones, trans men definitely benefit far more. Trans men naturally have like an easier way of passing with hormones because, you know, having a beard is very distinctive to men, right? Having an Adam's apple is usually very distinctive to men. Having a deep voice is usually very distinctive to men. It's definitely very easy to pass as a man compared to passing as a woman, because there are so many more requirements to physically look like a woman in society. There's a lot more effort involved, whereas men, you know, they can just be men, right? women usually have to put a little bit more effort into their appearance and whatever. Trans men still obviously have it hard. Trans people in general still have it very hard. Like, it's not like this oppression Olympics type thing. Like, we both have it very difficult to be accepted into society, right? But I do think like trans men naturally do have a little bit more of a benefit in this regard. What makes me think that women are not treated equally? In a general sense, it is just a little bit more unsafe for women to be in a day-to-day life compared to men, because I think men just are naturally easier, or they're more it's easier for them to just protect themselves outside. I don't care if people catcall me, whatever. It's very like irrelevant, right? But the following and the stalking that women oftentimes get is what's uncomfortable and what usually doesn't happen to men. And if it does happen to men, oftentimes, right, a man will just like yell and be like, fuck off, or whatever it is. But a woman oftentimes can't necessarily protect herself in these situations because of, whatever it may be. I feel I really don't leave the house, right? Unless like I'm with like my man, usually, right? Because I just don't really feel safe going out. I don't like being approached. I don't like any of that. If you want to catcall me from a distance, whatever, feel fine, right? It doesn't affect me. But I don't like being approached as something that is insanely uncomfortable, because I'm a 5'2" person, right? There's nothing that I can really do to somebody that's going to ward them off for like foreseeable future. Okay, just nothing. I love how like red my chest looks. This is what lighting does. I just look so pink. Yeah, I mean, I definitely think I want to learn martial arts. I definitely think like I want to learn like some self-defense stuff, but I think at a certain point, I mean, even in this situation, right, women will just have a harder time protecting themselves because naturally they're just smaller than men. That's, sexism, whatever. Like, women are oftentimes just not as strong as men. There's definitely like only as far as you can go, right? Yeah, the exposure today is really fucked because I removed the plant, which was like a huge like dark color in the back, which really balanced it out relatively. So now we're just like very overexposed. I'm gonna get somebody to come put a plant in the background so it balances it out a little bit. Oof. I think it's a little bit better with the plant in the back, right? It's less severe. How do you actually feel about people treating non-sexual content like a sexual content? Like stuff coming over from your adult stuff to Twitch, etc. I don't really mind. I definitely understand like there's always going to be a blend, right? It's just like how it is, and I like that. I like that there's a lot of openness in regards to who I am in all capacities, right? However, if you have social intelligence, you will know when to bring it up and in what capacity and in how and like what way to bring it up, right? So it definitely is like, it's always going to be a balance. I mean, socializing is a balance. Some people just don't have that, capacity. But I don't really personally mind it because I like having, that openness to talk about like who I am as a person, like being like a trans, like sex worker or whatever. I think it's a very interesting story to tell, and I think people find it very interesting. Why do most trans people have NSFW content? I think particularly why a lot of trans people are in that industry is because Oftentimes trans people are pigeonholed into being a sex worker because of just the natural fetishization that comes with being a trans person. To some extent, it doesn't make sense not to capitalize off of it, because being able to capitalize off of it then gives us a level of comfort that otherwise most likely would not be ascertained, right? I live very comfortably and I don't have to have, like a regular job for the most part. And I really appreciate that. But it's because of the fact that I do what I do that I don't have to have like a job that would naturally expose me to, a variety of other things. I'm gonna curl my lashes again because I love doing it. It was fun to wear this. I loved it. Anyways, bye guys, and have a lovely, lovely day.